that's good, yeah. In a town this size, I would think you should be able to. For most of us, we have no problem naming our next door neighbors. I think I could even name 3 or 4 of them, no longer than I've been here. But what about the folks that live 3 or 4 doors down, 3 blocks over, or, in Babe's case, over on the next hill, maybe? Can we name all those folks? Do we know them? Now, you see, I ain't got a good excuse because I just moved here, okay? But how about most of you who've lived here 10, 20 years, or maybe all of your lives? Can you name those folks? Do you know everyone that lives in your neighborhood? The fact is that most of us don't have to go very far away from our house to find people who we really don't know. Isn't that true? You see, we now live in a society where people might have 200 Facebook friends, but really don't know anyone well living right in their own neighborhood. Many folks say they have few close friends they know well enough that if they found themselves in trouble or in some crisis situation, that they could actually ask them for help. Now, there was a time when people would walk around the neighborhood, sit out on the front porch and visit with their neighbors, conversate, over the backyard fence, talk about, just what was going on around town or what the neighbors were doing, stopping by for coffee or iced tea, just because. But now it seems things have changed. Now we make coffee for ourselves and we sit down in front of our computers and we chat with our Facebook friends, many of which we have never maybe actually met face to face. We're plugged in and wired up. We are often, though, disconnected from the very people we live closest to. This loss of neighborliness is also due to the fact that we seem to be busier now than ever before. We are. Our schedules just seem to get packed tighter and tighter with busyness. And in the midst of our higher level of busyness, just about all forms of organized social events, service clubs, church, you name it, they're all experiencing a decline in membership and participation. People today simply are not involved in these kinds of organizations at the same level that they used to be in the past. And when sociologists are asked about this social ill that has popped up of late, they identify it as declining social capital. In other words, people aren't as willing as they used to be to invest themselves in their communities. Many people believe it's a clear symptom of the me-first culture that seems to be permeating our society. The result of this decreased level of social participation is producing a feeling of a loss of community. And it seems very strange, though, that in the most connected, plugged-in, wired culture in history, we have more people in this country today who feel isolated, lost, unloved, and unvalued than ever before. And that's sad. Mick Carter, is a community activist who lives and writes in Shreveport, Louisiana. And he puts it another way. He says, he truly believes that the internet, while it's such a wonderful invention, but the internet and social media have also had a negative effect on our community involvement. He says, we have become a cut flower civilization. It looks pretty for a while, but it has no roots. And the bloom is beginning to fade. This is exactly the concern that Paul is expressing in his letter to the Colossian church. On one hand, Paul's very excited about what's going on there. This is a brand new church. It's vital and alive, and it's growing, and it's reaching people. It's involved in ministries and its community. And he's celebrating that. But then on the other hand, he understands that they must stay on their toes, that they must work to stay relevant, not become too comfortable, or they will become complacent and stop being a force for good in their community. Now, since I'm new here, I can't really say, but I hope that this is not a cut flower church. One that looks beautiful for a time, but is destined to eventually wither because it has no root, because it has not produced any lasting fruit. A church that produces fruit is one that is filled with people who build relationships and work to bring new people into faith in Jesus Christ. They work to help these new Christians get connected so that they have a place to belong, and in this way, they are no longer a visitor or a guest, but they truly become part of the group. And this eventually binds them to the church with strong ties and produces a deep root, so that they are deeply rooted in their faith and in their church. And then they have the ability to produce fruit on their own. Fruit that lasts. In his letter, Paul first reminds them of the importance of person and place. You are holy, he says, and you are family. This is implied by his calling them brothers. As for your place, you are in Christ, and you are in the community of Colossae. Or one could say, you've got one foot in heaven and the other on the earth. One in the church and the other in the world. Christians function best, you see, when their blooms are in the air and their roots are firmly planted in the ground. Take the flower out of the soil, and before long it begins to wither. On the other hand, if a plant is all root and stem and never produces any flower or any fruit, it will soon be ignored and forgotten. Paul believes that the church, though, is able to thrive both in the world and in Christ because of the transforming power of faith and love. His message to the Colossians is one that we would all do well to take note of. We can also become people of virtue, more virtuous than we currently are, perhaps. People that bear good fruit, people that when others look at our lives and how we are living and what we are doing, they see more than just the person we are, but they also see Christ in us. And if we want to follow the model of the church at Colossae, if we want to avoid being a cut flower church, clearly we must expect more of ourselves. Sociologists identified the problem, a declining social capital, or a failure to invest in the community that we live in. I would translate this also as people who focus far too much on themselves and forget that they are part of a greater community. And we are part of this community whether we like it or not. We live here. It's our community. This then necessarily brings forth another question. The last few Sundays we've been talking about love of God, love of neighbor. How much do we really love one another? Many things are competing for our time and attention. There's just no question about that. Every day is a pie, and we slice it into so many different pieces. Preparing for work, getting to work, working a job, caring for family, maintaining our homes, raising our children, spending time with our spouse, our family, our extended family, our friends. And then you throw in all those school activities on top of that. Sports, extracurricular activities, time for our own recreation. When you add it all up, there's not much left of the pie. And then when some folks try to find time for worship and church activities, a Bible study group, or other things, well, there's just not enough time to go around, and those things, though, seem to get pushed down to the bottom of a lot of folks' priority list, unfortunately. With the added pressure most families feel on their time, is it any wonder why our churches are not thriving like they once were? Yet our participation in church activities, in its missions, and in its ministries is what breathes life into our congregations. Now, we don't know how the Colossians spent their time, really. We don't know if they spent more or less time walking to work or riding their donkey to work than we do trying to drive to work. Or if they spent more time repairing their homes or worked longer hours than we do. In all likelihood, though, their daily lives were every bit, if not more, physically demanding and more complicated than ours. But yet, they still poured themselves into their new church. Paul tells us that the church in Colossae had a vital energy about it. In fact, he gives us the notion that if he could only bottle it and take it to other churches, he would do so. Perhaps we need to come to a place where the rewards of creating social bonds among us are worth the effort. Think about it. Do you get more enjoyment from watching your favorite program on TV or talking about your daily joys and concerns with a friend or neighbor who shares your faith? No doubt flopping down on the couch in front of the TV is the easiest thing to do. But guess what? You get out of that exactly what you put into it, which, by the way, is not much. And while there's no one among us who can wave a magic wand and cure the attitudes that are undermining the social capital in our society today, or in our churches, or our service clubs, or wherever, yet we can choose to place God in church activities a little bit higher up on our priority lists, can't we? We can choose. Things do not have to necessarily conflict with our church activities because we have a choice. We can also choose to follow Paul's advice. Fill our lives with faith and love and knowledge and wisdom. Avoiding the cut flower syndrome. Building social capital in our lives doesn't have to be difficult, and it really doesn't have to be all that stressful. But it does require more effort than camping out on our couches and exercising our thumbs on our smartphones. Remember that we are in Christ, but we are also in the world. We are in Christ. We are a part of the Wesley United Methodist Church family, and we are also a part of the Triton community. And it really isn't hard to get to know some of those neighbors maybe you don't know that well, or get to know some that you do a little better, and begin to create opportunities to have some of those God conversations. You can start small. Find out the names of your neighbors that you may not know that live, 5 houses away or whatever. Find out if they have a church home or not. Begin to think of ways that you can develop a relationship with them. And then when the time is right, when you have done everything that you can do to be a friend to them, then you might have an opportunity to have that God conversation with them. It's really a pretty easy formula. Make a friend, be a friend, talk about your faith. There's nothing hard about it. It just means you have to desire to do it and create situations that give you the opportunity to do it. Let's pray. Loving God, we thank you for this church and this community that we live in. Lord, help us to be an active part of both. For we have one foot in heaven and one foot in the world. We are your representatives.